morning, everybody. Thank you very much, Mr. Gray, Chairman of the Egyptian-British Chamber of Commerce, and of course for the Chairman of the British-Egyptian Business Association, Mr. Nasser, for extending this invitation to participate and speak in this very important event. Of course, all my greetings extended to all my dear valuable participants and business leaders. I understand my intervention is on Egypt's path towards sustainable development from vision to implementation. So let me walk you through the Sustainable Development Plan for Egypt from the strategy throughout the policies to the implementation. And let me start by saying that Egypt was one of the pioneer countries that adopted a Sustainable Development Strategy 2030. And this Sustainable Development Strategy 2030 represented the national version of the Agenda 2030, the SDGs 2030. And what are the main fundamentals of this strategy in terms of sustainability? First, this strategy, when it started, it tackled the three main pillars of development. We tackled the economic, social, and environmental dimensions. Not only this, but these three pillars of development were interrelated and interconnected. So we cannot adopt the economic policies and ignore the social dimension of it or ignore the environmental. So these were the three pillars of the strategy, were interconnected and interrelated, and they had to go hand in hand. What also ensures the sustainability of this strategy is that it was done through a great participatory approach. It is not the government strategy, nor the private sector, nor the civil society, but basically it was a people strategy. A wide range of participation, public dialogue was done through different segments of the population, including a wide representation of young people and of women too. After that, we started by end of 2016, Egypt embarked on an economic reform program. This reform program was basically to address significant structural deficiencies that the economy was suffering from. The economic reform program entailed implementation of a wide range of reforms, including disciplining both the fiscal and the monetary policies, restructuring some sectors, most notably the energy sector, liberalizing the exchange rate, improving the investment climate, and with all the aim to increase competitiveness and restore investors' confidence in the Egyptian economy. At the heart of this economic reform program were several legislative and institutional reforms contributing to more conducive business environment, and these include, not limited to, the new investment law, a new industrial licensing act, a bankruptcy and exit mechanism act, a new SME law that helps to integrate the informal sector. All these legislative reforms were at the heart of the economic reform program. Aside to this, we also substantially invested in infrastructure in order to enhance the competitiveness of our economy. In addition to that, we invested a lot in human capital, and there was a turnaround plan in human capital, specifically in education. So this was at the core of our reform plan program. All these measures provided us with a significant fiscal space and with resilience to face external shocks. And accordingly, Egypt achieved a consistent economic growth, reaching a 5.6% growth by the end of 2019. End of December 2019, we reached a consistent economic growth, reaching 5.6%, and a consistent decline in unemployment rate, reaching 7.5% by the end of last year. As of course we all know, in 2020 the world faced an unprecedented humanitarian crisis. This crisis posed major challenges in all economies, whether they are developed or developing economies. And for the first time, we faced a complete lockdown to most of the sectors of the economy. In order to deal with the pandemic, our strategy also was a sustainable strategy. It centered on the need to maintain a balance between ensuring people's health, which is top priority, and sustaining economic activity. And actually, this was a difficult challenge, but it was a doable one. The Egyptian government adopted a proactive strategy very early on, tackling all necessary measures to mitigate the negative impact of the crisis on most of the vulnerable segments of the population. Our key objective relied on a different dimension. First is to contain the spread of the virus without imposing a full lockdown. To support the economic activity through giving some support to some specific sectors, monitoring developments regarding the crisis and updating all the forecasts accordingly, postponing all dues and credit entitlements to some of the sectors that suffered the most, like the tourism sector and the SME sector. We also supported the irregular workers. They were central to our strategy. Hence, a cash disbursement, a cash grant was disbursed to this segment. And in addition to that, also we created a database for these workers to enable them now to classify them, enable them to provide them with proper training and with proper and decent jobs. These measures were critical. It enabled Egypt to be one of the very few growing economies in the midst of the crisis. And according to a recent IMF revision projections for Egypt, which raised its growth to 3.5%. The growth rate for 2019-2020 reached almost 3.6%. And of course, with the government interventions, because without the government interventions, we would have reached less than that. The post-COVID era, of course, necessitates rearrangement of our, not only our priorities, but the world priorities. Triggering an increased focus on specific sectors and specific activities, such as the health sector, digitalization, infrastructure, agriculture, manufacturing, and of course, the importance of the green economy and reopening and rebooting green. Hence, the key elements of our sustainability strategy was to increase investments, our public investments in health sector, this plan for about 45%, by tackling also major issues such as increase in number of ICU beds, number of childcare beds, automation of the health records in most of the hospitals, also an increase in the investment in the infrastructure and digitalization sector. We increased investment by 300% in order to create the technological and information ecosystem for the automation of the government services. And of course, as we always say, crisis face challenges, we face challenges, but it provides us with good opportunities. So it helped us to accelerate our efforts in digitalization and in government services. A great emphasis also is being done on the localization of manufacturing activities of key industries like pharmaceuticals, further expansion in construction of industrial zones, supporting the development of supply chains in order to hedge against any disruptions that we have met. Aligning with this is the green economy principles. in the investment projects, international investment projects. We reached this year around 30% of our projects that abide by the green economy principles. We target to reach about 100% over the next 3 years. We coordinated with the Ministry of Environment to introduce the environmental guide for public investment projects for all public investments to adhere to sound environmental codes. This has been approved a week ago by the cabinet. They approved these codes. Of course, it is not limited to maximizing the benefits from all unconventional water resources, waste management, and increased reliance on smart transportation, as well as renewable energy. Of course, as you know, we have launched recently the green bonds, which indicates the Egyptian government's keenness to prioritize sustainable finance. These bonds will be used to finance mainly clean transportation and water and waste management products, and of course, renewable energy products. All these efforts would not be sustainable if we did not continue the economic reform program and move to the reform of the real economy. As you know, the economic reform program that we started in November 2016 tackled mainly the monetary and the fiscal side of the economy. The government has been working for the past few months or a year almost to work on structural reform measures for the real economy, and that's what we call the second phase of the reform program. It implements structural reforms targeting the real economy, constructive structural reforms in order to make sure that what we achieved is sustainable. It includes create new job opportunities and diversify production patterns and improve the business climate, enhance, of course, the competitiveness of Egypt's exports in order to achieve sustainable and inclusive economic development. The main pillars of this program are diversifying the production structure of the Egyptian economy, moving more towards industry, agriculture, digitalization, enhancing the role of the private sector, and promoting the flexibility of the labor market through advanced technical education and training. In addition to the amendments that the government has passed a few months ago on the new private-public partnership law, Egypt established its first sovereign fund, acting as one of the most reliable mechanisms for creating more effective public-private partnership opportunities for projects that bring about mutual benefits and interest and contributes to sustainable development. We aim to raise value across the board and increase joint investment with the private sector, whether this private sector is local, regional, or international. The role of the fund lies in attracting private investments in the country's underutilized or unutilized assets in order to unleash the country's vast potential and create long-term value for our future generation. The Sovereign Fund of Egypt aims to monetize and unlock value from the country's immense and rich resources, most notably its geographical features, its heritage, and of course its different diversified talents. Aligning with the reprioritizing the country's strategy, we established 4 funds aligning with the government's prioritization of its sectors. We have established a health service and pharmaceutical fund, a financial service and digitalization fund, infrastructure and utilities fund, in addition to real estate and tourism and heritage fund. These sub-funds are preparing for, as I said, aligning with the state's priorities for the upcoming period and supporting the private sector to work with the fund in a more flexible manner. The fund recently also collaborated with the General Authority for the Suez Canal, as well as a consortium from the private sector, in order to localize one of the main manufacturers in Egypt, most notably the railway cars, satisfying Egypt's needs and providing vast opportunities for exporting, most notably to African countries. The fund has also signed different protocols and MOUs with with international companies, such as the London-based Actus, to enhance investments in energy and infrastructure sectors. And of course, we are open to more collaboration and partnership with different private enterprises, whether on the national or on the international levels. Finally, I'd just like to reiterate our commitment to work with our partners, with the private sector. And I would like to say that all efforts to increase the involvement of the private sector in the development process aim at enhancing the sustainability and ensuring that that's an inclusive strategy. As I said at the beginning, the strategy was not a government strategy, nor a private sector. It is a people strategy. We aim to work hand in hand with everybody. As you know, sustainability is about the balance, to strike the balance between satisfying all the current needs without compromising the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs. Thank you for listening, and I'll be very happy to receive any interventions.